Welcome back! We're finally at the section where we'll be importing data into a shiny new Power BI desktop file. Now, for this section, I'll be using a flat file that contains a series of tables that we'll be using for the final report. So if you haven't already, go ahead and follow the instructions on this video's page or corresponding GitHub location. Once you've done that, you can resume this video and follow along with the tutorial. Now, let's take a quick peek at the report requirements so we understand what data we'll want to import into our Power BI file. We have here a set of report requirements we reviewed in previous videos, but let's dissect this a bit and determine exactly what data it's saying we'll need. From a data perspective, there's two primary ways you'd want to use any data that is brought into the report. You'd either bring in categorical information that you'd want to display, or data that you would want to do math against. So let's break down our requirements into one of these two categories. We'll start by first determining what categorical or textual information we'll need. The first thing I notice is that there's a couple of places where it's asking for the data to be broken out by year or filtered by year. Those fields would typically come from a date or calendar table. I also see a few spots where there's geography and store information being requested, so we'll also want to bring in the information about those as well. Lastly, we also have requests for channel and product filters, which are the final things we'll add to our categories list. Now that we've determined all categorical information we'll need in our report, let's determine what calculations we'll need. There are quite a few requests for net profit throughout the requirements list, so that I'll go at the top of our calculations list. We also have a couple spots where net quantity is being requested as well. And lastly, there's two requirements asking to see calculations related to order counts. For our first import, we'll focus on importing the categorical information first. Alright, now that we've translated our requirements into categories and calculations, let's quickly review where this data can exist and then import it into our Power BI report. As I've already mentioned in previous videos, Power Query can connect to nearly any data source, everything you see here and more, with new connection types being added almost every month to Power BI. Now, for our exercise and this course, we'll be importing all of our data from Excel files. Today, one of the best datasets that is free and publicly available is the Contoso dataset. What I've done is reproduced all the necessary data from that into a few Excel files, which will make importing and using that data really easy for us. Alright, let's get started. Alright. Now that we've had a chance to talk about the type of data we're going to be bringing in this video, which is that textual or a lookup information, let's go ahead and use the new Power BI desktop file. If you haven't opened one already, go ahead and open that. I have one here called Learn Power BI Report, and this is just a brand new file that I've simply named and saved that to a folder. And we're going to use this file as a device to bring in all of the data. So I'm going to go up here to this section called Get Data up here under an external data tab because I want to bring data into our report. So I'm going to select Get Data. I'm going to select Excel. Here we are. Put this into the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to my folder on my C drive, the same spot that you will have placed it as well, which will be in your Contoso data model folder and in lookup tables. And I'm going to connect to the Contoso lookup tables file right here. And I'm going to treat this as my data source. And I'm going to hit open. Beautiful. Now there's one thing in here that I want to pause for a little bit and just talk about, because there's a really important concept that we need to know about when we're connecting to data. Because what I've just done right now is I've connected to an Excel file. And very specifically, if you look under the navigator, you'll notice there on the list of items that you can import into this file, there's two icons that you can see here. Now the ones at the top, if you look closely, they kind of look like a table, and the ones at the bottom, it kind of looks like an Excel sheet. And there's a very important distinction between these two. The tables themselves are typically the better source to connect to if you have an option to. And we'll see this a little bit later when we bring in some other table types, but I want to mention it here. So tables are much safer and more secure to connect to, because within an Excel file, a table is a defined range, meaning that it has specific headers, information, and a certain number of rows attached to that table. Now, if I was to connect to, let's say channel as an example, if I was to connect to the sheet for where my dim channel table is sitting, it's going to bring in this information, but also if there was ever notes typed in anywhere in any of the cells, if there was any other information that was not part of the table itself, but was existing on the sheet somewhere, that would get brought in as soon as I connected to the sheet. So the safe option, just as a good default to have, anytime you're connecting to an Excel file that has both the sheet and a table to connect to, always connect to the table first. It's going to be a safer option, save you a lot of headache down the road, and we want to avoid any complications down the line as a developer, just as much as possible. So go ahead and select the channel, the date, geography, and the product information as well here. There we are. Yep, and this is all the information related to what we saw in our project requirements. We have the channel and product information, the calendar information from our date table, the 3 product tables, which is going to contain the information about product, and as well as store. And that aligns with all of the information that we wanted to bring in for that. Alright, now I have these selected, and these will create a query for each one of these things. Now down here you'll have a couple of options to use with the kind of the loading or the editing of your data. Now for now, this is a clean data set that we're connecting to and that we're importing, so we're going to go ahead and just use the load button. Later on we will explore in future videos other ways to edit and do a lot of really awesome transformations and data cleanups, and that will be in the query editor if you hit this edit button here. But for now, let's just do a nice clean load and click this. Beautiful. If we look over on our fields list here, we'll see all of the tables that we just finished importing: our channel, date, geography, all of our product information, and our store information. So we have all of that textual information that we've been wanting to bring into our file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here and actually talk about the significance of what just happened when we imported this data into our file, and what it means in terms of refreshes and the way that the data is connected to the source. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file, there we are, and transition over to a discussion on exactly what it meant when we imported this data. Alright, now that we've actually brought some data into our data model, let me explain exactly what happened when we did that and what we can do with our data. What we just accomplished was connecting to an Excel data source using Power Query, which brought the tables into our data model when we hit that load button. Now, it's important to note that doing this is importing a copy of the data from the source into our data model. However, it is not a single one-time transfer. Power BI has something called scheduled refreshes. That means that any data in our report can be refreshed to obtain new data at whatever frequency the client would need. It's fully automated too, so there's no need to do any type of manual refresh after you built the report and set up the scheduled refresh in Power BI service. Some of the more keen observers might have noticed that the only actual tables that we imported this time were just lookup tables or tables that contain a lot of textual information. We haven't actually brought in our sales data yet, which is going to let us do all of our calculations and aggregations and everything else. And that's actually what we're going to do in our next video. We're going to learn about a really great feature with Power Query, which is the folder combine function that lets you automatically grab data from a folder and combine that into a final output. So that's what we'll do then, and I will see you in our next video.